and welcome to the lecture of Horace. So Horace is known primarily as a poet, composer of odes, satires and epistles. Okay, so let's just first begin by studying about Horace. So Horace, just a second. Okay, so he was primarily a poet, composer of odes, satires and epistles. Okay, so now in the Latin world, the most famous and influential critic was Horace. Okay, so he was writing at the time from 65 to 8 BCE. Okay, so he was writing at that time. Or he was Quintus Horatius Fluxus with his celebrated Ars Poetica. So with that, Aristotle was actually famous for his work Poetics. Okay, Plato Republic, Longinus on the Sublime. Okay, Philip Sidney Apology for Poetry. Similarly, Horace criticism has been given in his works Ars Poetica. Okay, so Ars Epistles to Pisones or Ars Poetica, that was his famous book. Okay, so it is also known as Epistles to Pisones or Ars Poetica. Now, it was written as an epistle in verse. Okay, so it was written in the form of a poetry, right? It was written in the form of poetry. Okay, and basically Horace text is traditionally divided as by David H. Richer. Okay, so Ars Poetica has been divided by David H. Richer. And in how many parts it was divided? So we will see in the later slides. So please remember, first of all, he is a poet and the composer of odes. His odes are also known as Horatian odes. He was living at the time of Augustus Caesar. Now, Augustus Caesar was a very famous writer. Even the writers of Augustan age tried to has named their age as Augustan age. Why? Because Augustus Caesar rule was a very kind of a full of prosperity. There were no war, there were no kind of corruption, there were proliferation of literary text. Literature was at its peak. Okay, and that's why this age is known as a very productive age. So that's why he was living in the time of Augustus Caesar, and he has been renowned as one of the great critics. He associated with the notion that poem is like a painting. Okay, so he says that a poem is like a painting and that poetry should teach and delight. Alright, so poetry should be having the kind of a dual, service, that it should first teach and also delight. And this was the idea which was given by Aristotle, unlike Plato. Plato said that the only aim of poetry is to instruct, but Aristotle said that the first aim of poetry should be delight and then it to instruct, because if the poetry will instruct, then why the people will be interested in. Okay, so first aim of poetry according to Plato was to instruct, and the first aim of poetry according to Aristotle was to delight and then to instruct. Horace also followed the same pattern of Aristotle. He also said that the poetry should have the kind of both twin function, that is to instruct and delight. Now Horace art. Okay, Horace text has been divided by David H. Richer. Okay, so David H. Richer was the person who divided Horace's work Ars Poetica into 3 parts. Now line 1 to 41 are known as poesis. And what is poesis? Poesis is the subject matter. Subject matter of the poem. What is the topic on which the poetry has been written? That is poesis. Next is line 42 to 294. So 42 is poema. And poema is basically the technique with which the poet is writing. The technique of writing a poetry that has been given in the section poema. Next, lines 295 to 476 is basically poeta. Poeta means about the poet, how the poet should be in his profession. Okay, so please remember, Ars Poetica is written in 3 parts, and this 3 part had been divided by David H. Richer. The first part is poesis, which is meaning about subject matter, and this basically stems from line 1 to line 41. So this is basically your poesis. Okay, next is poema. Poema is basically from 40 to line 42 to line 294, and it is about the technique of the poetry, that how the poetry should be written. The last line 295 to 467 is poeta, which is about the poet, how the poet should be. Alright, so that is the three parts which are given in the Ars Poetica. Let's look at the Ars Poetica. Now, Ars Poetica, Ben Jonson is the first person to translate Ars Poetica. Okay, so it was Ben Jonson who translated Ars Poetica. Please remember that. Okay, so basically Ars Poetica was first translated into English in 1566. In 1566, it was first translated to English by Thomas Drant. Okay, in English it was translated in 1566 by Thomas Drant. A translation by Ben Jonson was published posthumously, matlab after the death of the author. And who was the author? Horace. It was published by Ben Jonson after the death of Horace in 1640. Okay, in 1640 is what published. Now this Ars Poetica is known for the discussion of the principle of decorum. Okay, basically it is modeled on the Aristotle mode of literary criticism, and it is modeled on decorum. Alright, so the use of appropriate vocabulary and diction in each style of writing. So that is a decorum which has to be followed by all the poets. And for Horace's criticism of purple prose, okay, a term coined by him to mean the use of flowery language. So he has given the word purple patch that we're studying in the comment slide. So please remember, this Ars Poetica basically talks about the decorum, that is the style of writing, the rules of vocabulary which needs to be followed by all the writers in writing the poetry. And as I told you, the subject of this Ars Poetica fall into three divisions: poesis, poema and poeta. So poesis is basically about the poetry. Okay, poesis, sorry, is the subject matter. Okay, poema is about the technique, in what technique a poetry should be written. And poeta is what? It is about the poet, how the poet should be following certain decorum while writing the poetry. Okay, so basically Ars Poetica is a body of rules and principle, that is a decorum, which intending poets will find useful in their composition. Now this particular treatise opens with Horace's stress on the need of observing organic unity and propriety. Okay, so Horace said that there is a need by the author to observe organic unity, that is unity of action, time and place, and propriety. Propriety is what? The decorum, order, discipline and rules and regulation which the author needs to follow. He also said that if a painter should try to unite a horse neck, okay, to a human head and to other various feature or to limbs collected from every kind of animal, so that the woman's fair from above should end in a foul and ugly fish beneath, tell me, my friend, could you control your laughter if admitted to a private view? So he says that if the author, if the painter draws something, no, out of something, if he is attaching the head of the human being to a horse, or limbs to other thing, or the fish to a woman, so do you think that art will be appropriate to you? Will you be just seriously looking at that art, or will you be laughing at that? Of course you will burst into laughter. So why? Because this particular art will not have the organic unity, will not have the propriety, will not have the decorum in which you can connect the points. Okay, so similar here saying that the poetry should also have certain kind of organic unity, propriety and decorum which enables the reader to connect the dots and understand the poetry in a better way. Okay, so that's why he's saying that the main model of writing Ars Poetica was a kind of a plea to the audience to please maintain the organic unity, propriety, decorum in writing any kind of poetry. And that's why he has divided the three divisions, that is poesis, that first of all he will teach what kind of subject matter should a poet pick to write the poetry, poema, how the poem should be written, and poeta, how the poet should follow the decorum and the kind of a discipline while writing that particular poetry. Alright, let's move ahead. Alright, so let's talk about the first point, poesis. Poesis is what? Subject matter. Okay, poesis is basically the subject matter of the poetry. Okay, so what he says that, so Ars Poetica opens with the assertion that the poem must be having the organic unity. Okay, so first point he says about the poetry, that how the subject matter of the poetry should have the organic unity. So the poet is free to indulge his fancy, or you can say the imagination, but he must not create monsters or impossible figures. Okay, so he says that poetry is free for poets are free to imagine things. Poets are free to just bring that imagination on paper, but they should not create certain kind of monsters or impossible figures to which the audience or the readers fails to agree. That kind of poetry will not result in a kind of delight, because if you are able to connect to someone, like you are going, suppose you have watched Dear Zindagi, okay, which Alia Bhatt and Shah Rukh Khan was the cast. So by looking at Dear Zindagi, if you have the same kind of experiences in your life as well, okay, if you have certain kind of problems with your parents, or with your, if you have a kind of a problem in connecting to people, right, then if you watch Dear Zindagi, you will be drawn towards that movie. Why? Because the cast is not, the characters are not impossible figures. We do experiences that kind of experiences in daily life. We do have that kind of circumstances in daily life. So you are better be connecting that with that particular book or a movie, and you will be able to relate and get the enjoyment and amusement from that. Okay, so that was also kind of plea by Horace as well, that poets should bring the imagination, but not to the extent that he ends up creating some impossible figure to which readers fail to connect. Okay, so that was a basic concern of Horace. Now, as in a painting, so in a poem, all the parts must be vitally connect with one another. So as I given you the example, he said that suppose if I draw a horse, and some horse will have kind of a face of a human, a fish is coming out of the lady's leg, okay, or some impossible figures I draw, so you will not be able to connect to that painting. Okay, you will not be able to connect to that painting in a better way, and that painting will result in bad understanding. So same he says with the poetry as well. Okay, so the poetry should have a connection with one another. The words, the ideas should be having a kind of connection, and that will be able to build upon the poetry. Now, a wise discretion must be exercised in the use and so it is a basically organic unity is talking about. So a painting, he said that as in painting, so in poetry, like the painting should have a unity, similarly a poetry should also have a kind of unity. Okay, so a wise discretion must be exercised in the use and choice of words. The poet is at liberty to coin new words and revise the old one, but this should be done with much creation. So he says that poets are like bards, okay, and they can coin new words. And this term he has known as poetic license. Okay, he calls that poetic license. Like he says, like gods are like bards of this world. They have the license to create things in their way. They have their own imagination, and they can work on their imagination in their own way. Similarly, poets are also bards because they are creating poetry. They are also the kind of creators, and though they are created, though they are given the status of God, so they should have that kind of liberty of coining new words, okay, and revive the old one, because the classicals have the kind of notion of collection, selection and arrangement theory. So the classics used to believe that a poet should collect a lot of words, okay, as many words as a poet can collect. Then that poet should select the words which he wants to include in his writing, and after selection he should arrange those words in that particular writing. So that is the collection, selection and arrangement theory. But Horace defied this theory. He says that as the poets are bard, poets have the status of God, then why not poets should create their own words and revive the old ones? Just let go of the previous words and create the new words, because the old words are very much familiar to the readers, and as poetry's first attempt is to delight. Now if you are reading the same thing again and again, you might get bored. Okay, you might not have fresh sensations. you might not be able to refresh yourself or rejuvenate yourself. But if you are reading something new, some new words will come across, your sensations will be revived, they will be renewed, and you will be able to enjoy that poetry in a better way. So that's why he said that poets should have the license and can have the license to create new words and design their own phrases. All right. Next, he talked about language. He says that language is like a tree and words are the leaves which wither every year and are succeeded by the new ones. Okay, so he has in the pure poetic license only, he has given that example that language is like a tree and words are leaves, and leaves, what happens when we just look at leaves, they wither after some time, they fall. Similar with the words, they get excluded from the kind of sensations because they don't provide the same sensation when you just come across at the first time. Now the poet may revive absolute words, thus give them currency. Okay, so they can just revive, they just come up with the synonyms of different words and just revive the sensations of the reader. Now each particular genre should stick to the meter allotted in the ancient Greek. So he talks about the meter. Okay, so whatever meter is prescribed to any kind of poetry, that poetry should be written in that meter only. The meter should not change with the for that kind of poetry in every time it has been written. Like for epic poetry, they used iambic hexameter.